So Sebastien, a lot of social games these days are very derivative of a lot of games that already exist out there, existing IPs. How is that going to change going forward?
Well, I hope it's going to change, first of all. I think, the basic premise of social games is a really exciting one. There's about only 200 million people playing games, and there's 1.5 billion people online. And so it always struck us as weird why everyone's listening to music, everyone's watching movies, but not everyone's playing games. And so we tried, when we launched games on the Facebook platform, to introduce new categories of game. Simulation with Pet Society, Restaurant City, games which you had to play with your friends. Lots of products have been, copied or inspired by, those early innovations. But I think there's room for many new types of games, on the Facebook platform. And so I think in the first quarter of next year, you're going to see a raft of announcements from new entrants in the social gaming category with very new, innovative game design concept. Not only distribution concept, but game design concept. And we've already announced the coming of the granddaddy of social games, which is Monopoly, celebrating its 75th anniversary this year. So as a social concept, it's a very proven concept, and it's going to come to the Facebook platform very soon. But we know that many other entrants will come next year, and Disney is going to be announcing hopefully a few things now that they've acquired Playdom as well. So the landscape is changing and evolving, and it's great for players.
Do you have any kind of idea how many people on Facebook are engaged with social games?
So here, I'm paraphrasing a Facebook number which has been bandied around, which is that roughly half Facebook users are engaged in games. So about 200 to 250 million users on a monthly basis play social games. And that's only on Facebook, because let's not forget that you have great social games outside of Facebook. In Japan, for example, with Dine, Gree, Mixi, and in other geographies as well.
Since the acquisition of Playfish by EA, you've had a lot of options in terms of existing brands and IPs out there. How do they do better in comparison to original IPs that you guys have developed previously?
So the IP question, it's an interesting question. I mean, brands are not necessary to build a successful social game, and it will never be. I think there's always room for innovation and for new concepts. However, if the opportunity for social game is to convince non-players to start playing, you need to touch them where they have an existing passion point. And we think that sports, for example, is one of those areas. Sport is the, I guess, ultimate social activity. 1 billion people reportedly tune into the World Cup. So we think that by developing products which include brands, but only to enable an offline passion point, then you have some truly sort of meaningful game experience. That's why we launched FIFA for free on Facebook during the World Cup, and Madden now for the start of the football season, and have a whole other range of sort of branded titles. It's not so much because of the power of brand to convince you to buy the game, which is what happens at retail, but more to get the power of brand to touch people in a passion point that exists outside of their online experiences, and to try to tell them, hey, you're a fan of football, you can continue that experience in a game environment. And that obviously means 15,000 licensed players and all kinds of different clubs, and playing your team against PSG or other local football teams.
Is FIFA your largest game right now?
No, our largest game is a game called Pet Society, which has roughly 20 million monthly active users. So I think nearly twice the size of Warcraft, on a very different type of audience, obviously. But FIFA has risen to become the top sports property on Facebook, and it's still very humble, beginning. And we have a lot to learn, but this is a brand new kind of category which we are trying to open. There's no such game that exists before, so we're just trying out new things and getting lots of feedback from players.
You had a quote a while back that within the next 2 years, the top 10 social games on Facebook would be from existing brands. Have you seen that to be true?
I think there's been a little bit of a status quo in social game over the past year in terms of the top 10, and I think that's hiding a much more meaningful trend, because this top 10 is ranked externally by what's referred to as MAU, monthly active users. And I think that's not the most meaningful characteristic. If you look underneath that cover and you look at the categories, you see the emergence of new categories. For example, there's the arcade category. PopCap released, Bejeweled Blitz. There's been, success from MindJolt. and other types of arcade games. So that's a new category. The sports category we were just talking about did not exist a year ago, and now has a few new entrants in addition to titles we've released with EA. And you have also some branded game like Family Feud, for example, also very successful. And so you see the emergence of those new categories, but where are your first-person shooters? Where are your 3D games? Where are your racing games? I mean, all those areas have traditionally been strong on every single platform, no matter how casual, even the Wii, right? And yet they're not present on Facebook. So there's lots of room still to innovate.
Do you think that's limited by the technology?
Technology is a factor. Flash is definitely a very specific platform to develop against, and also the usage pattern of our users. A few minutes at a time has given the rise to new sorts of mechanics. Something called appointment mechanic, where you come back every 3 hours or so to take care of something in your game. Those are new mechanics. But I do think that technology has never been a limiting factor to create great game experience. I think Nintendo has shown to the world that you can win with technology that's not probably the best, but that relies on great game design.
I'm very curious about micropayments. I know that's a major part of your business. What are people willing to pay for these virtual goods?
So that's another very interesting area. Micropayments, just to give you sort of a sense of scale, at Playfish, I can only speak about our own numbers, we sell about 90 million items a day, which, to put that in perspective...
That's a lot of cat food for pet society.
It's about 10 times the number of total items listed on eBay on any given day, which is just unbelievably high. This is just for Playfish, so from the ecosystem, I don't know what the number is, but it's a very, very big number. So why do people buy those items, and what can you buy? Well, to many people, this has been puzzling because they say, like, why do you buy a virtual apple? And we've sold 1.7 billion of those, so people buy them, but why do you buy them? And it really has to do with social emotions. Whereas, in Warcraft, for example, you'd buy functional goods, which give you a benefit in the game, so it's a solitary kind of benefit. In social games, you buy those items to get a social benefit. So you buy a cake because you want to gift it to your friend for his or her birthday. You buy a virtual rose for for Valentine, those kinds of things. So there's the gifting involved, and this is a social emotion. But also, more and more players are understanding virtual games because the underlying items have a meaning to them. In FIFA, for example, you can buy a gold player pack, which is a series of 5 players randomly selected of a top grade for about €8. So is that a micro-transaction? That's a pretty sizable transaction, but you can do this as many times as you want. And to a football fan, this is very meaningful. They might not understand the virtual cake, but they understand why they buy sort of a virtual player card. And so we think you need to develop the game themes until you hit something that has a meaning for you. And that's usually your aha moment. You go like, oh, I'm a fan of a music game, I'm a fan of an RPG game. And so you'll find a virtual transaction that makes sense for you.
So how do you determine how much value a virtual good has?
So today we are in the very early planned economy days. We decide centrally these are going to be the items.
Until people won't pay anymore.
And we try, we test those things. It's very hard. I mean, in an ideal world, you'd have an economy and you'd let users price virtual goods. But managing an economy is like taking the role of the Federal Reserve. I mean, it's a big undertaking. So we might eventually go there, but so far we're trying to adapt pricing to each individual situation. So some prices are different depending on your specific situation, your specific spending pattern, and what we know about you as a user, depending where you live, those kinds of your payment method, etc. It's very, very basic, and I think there's lots of room for improvement. But we're working together with some of our platform partners like Facebook to try to improve that experience.
Typically in console games, people want to pay upfront for a full version of a game, and then if they want to later go and buy the DLC, they're able to do that. But you guys have kind of flipped the model and given them a game for free with the option of then paying micropayments for more experience. Why do you think that's worked?
So we think that's worked for a very simple reason, is that our games are not designed to cater to the existing gamer. It's designed to cater for the non-gamer. And those people have never played a game before. So if they've already told you they're not going to drive to a GameStop and buy a box at $60. So what we have to do is lower the barriers to entry. And that means on the price side, we need to lower it to 0. On the distribution side, we need to reduce it to 1 click. No registration, no download, no client. And then, only then, can we convince our player about the quality of the experience they're trying, and tell them, well, you can continue to play for free, or if you want to, you can start spending, and here's a good few reasons why. but we never force them, and we try to respect and essentially let our players tell us how much they value our games. Has it ever happened to you that you buy a game and then you play it for, like 3 months in a row solid for $60? I mean, that's amazing value.
That's a great value.
But you would have spent probably up to $1,000, if you could have in small increments. And so for us, that's happened in our own games. Some of our players have spent thousands of dollars, and some have spent nothing. But by letting people define what value the game has to them individually, it creates sort of an easier entry point into that ecosystem.
Typically, how much do people spend?
So typically, we're talking about a free-to-play model where between 1% and 5% of players are currently spending. So that's a pretty low number. Compare that to about 10% in the casual game industry, which is more established. And those players are actually spending a significant amount of money, comparable to retail, I would say.
Do people ever give you the impression that they feel nickel and dimed by having to make micropayments?
No, on the contrary, we get the opposite. The biggest request that we've had in the past year is to increase the price point. Our users have told us we want more ways to pay. We want to be able to buy, for example, prepaid cards so that we can gift them to each other for Christmas or for birthdays, and so you can find them at most retail stores these days. They've asked us to introduce a $100 price point. And we thought, we were thinking about, exactly you said, can we reduce it down to like 50 cents or 10 cents? And actually, our users have told us, no, we want a higher price point so we don't have to do multiple transactions. So I think, what it tells us is that once you've convinced someone that you have a quality experience that is meaningful for a player, they want to spend more and more. And so they don't feel nickel and dime. I think they respect the fact that we offer them and we make the investment in offering them the content for free in the first place and let them decide whether the content is right for them. Whereas the experience at retail can be disappointing if you bought a really cool a game and then you play it and you find out that the experience is not great. Have you ever had those experiences?
A few times, yes. You did a promotion last year for Valentine's Day with different flower companies like Pro Flowers, for example, where you could actually buy real-world goods from within the social games. Do you see that going forward as a major revenue for you guys?
Absolutely. I think most companies that we've spoken to want to be present in social media, and for them that means more than a Facebook page. They want to be where the action is, and there's no better place than inside a game. So with Pro Flowers and FTD, what we did is that we give you a virtual rose, which you could either buy with virtual currency if you bought a real rose as well. And we encourage our users that their Valentine would actually like the real rose too. And we sold tens of thousands of real roses that way. And we recently did the same thing with Dr. Pepper, where in Restaurant City you can actually get virtual goods or Dr. Pepper goods which give you benefit inside the game and which are cool because in a restaurant you expect to find those kind of soft drinks, and they have a tie to the real Dr. Pepper bottles because you get code under the bottle caps. So I think that there's a lot of room for I wouldn't say product placement, but game enhancement through brands. And social games lend themselves better than video games because in Warcraft, for example, it would be odd to find real-world brands. But in a social game, it's the expectation. You want to map your real world onto the extension of that real world as a social experience. So, for the launch of Monopoly, for example, our fan base already has told us we can't wait because we love these Monopoly experiences. And it's what the brand embodies. And so having that as a promise, that's the promise of game design centered around those experiences.
World of Warcraft actually did a campaign with Mountain Dew, where they had a red version of Mountain Dew for the Horde and a blue version for Alliance.
Yeah.
Collector's edition. Yeah. So where do you see your profitability going, your revenue, your primary source of revenue coming from within the next few years? Do you see it as coming from advertising partnerships like we mentioned, or more from the micropayments?
So you cannot serve two masters. I think that's impossible. And so you have to decide as a company, who you are designing your products for. Most of the web companies and most of the web as a whole, apart from e-commerce, has been serving the advertising master and offering a consumer product just as a way to get paid by the advertiser. I'm being cynical, but that's really what the web has been about. The game industry, on the other hand, has served primarily their players and then inviting brands wherever it was meaningful. So we are firmly in that second camp, and we design games for our players and only introduce brands where it makes sense. I spend 99% of my time in meetings with external companies who want to advertise saying no. saying this doesn't fit, this doesn't work, this doesn't benefit the players, and we do not want to create, sub-quality experiences. So to answer your question, we expect, most in the future, our biggest revenue stream to come from direct player transactions, because that's the true vote of value that, consumers are putting forward, if you want, in terms of telling you that your content is great. And so I've often spoke about, the rise of the billion-dollar franchise in social gaming, because it's one thing to have gazillion users, but I can create a cheap quiz app on Facebook and get gazillion users. What's much harder is to get, monthly paid subscriber, as some of the MMOs have done, for example. And that's, when consumers start paying you directly, you've created something of great value. If advertisers are paying on top, just like with Hollywood, I think this is the greatest, parallel. In Hollywood, box office revenue is still the driving revenue, but most of the movies use product placement to pay for stage props and different accessories. So I think this is the kind of model that we probably will follow as an entertainment vertical.
Now, I know most of your games or all of your games are available on Facebook. How tied to Facebook as a platform are you going forward? Do you see a shift over to mobile, or are you going to primarily continue being a browser-based company?
So, as part of EA, EA is actually the number 1 mobile content provider in the world, by a large margin on every platform, from iPhone to, J2ME and Brew, the legacy businesses on smartphones. So mobile is extremely important for us, as is social, because it's 2 ways to come closer to the non-gamer, closer to our consumers, and going to where they are versus asking them to come to where we are, which has been the old model. But we are, very thankful for the work that the Facebook engineering team has done over the past 5 and 6 years. It's been a tremendous journey working with them on defining what is essentially not designed as a game platform. And we often laugh about this, but people forget that Facebook was not designed as a game platform. Neither was the iPhone, by the way. But some platforms are quicker than others to realize that games have become a prevalent use case for their users. And so, Steve Jobs was smart enough to recognize this. And on stage, he presented as a device with 3 functions, and then he came back later saying, and it's also a great gaming platform. I think, Facebook has recognized this even faster and admitted that, games represent a big use case and that they want to improve the experience for gamers and non-gamers alike. This being said, we're not a technology company. We make games for users, and as I mentioned, we recently launched in Japan, for example, and that's not on Facebook. We try to select the network that has the best social graph and that allows us to give you an experience that includes your real friend wherever you've decided to map those. And so today, that's predominantly Facebook, but in the future, it would be wherever you as a user elect to hold those relationships.
Excellent. Well, that's actually all the time we have. So thank you very much, Sebastien.
Great. Thanks, Veronica.
Continued success. Thank you.